by any means necessary on Radio Sputnik in Washington, D.C. I'm your host, Sean Blackmon, here with Jacquie Luqman. And as always, we are your guide for connecting the political, social, and economic movements shaping the world around us. And it's Friday, which means we're having another edition of our weekly segment, the Redspin Report, where we discuss sports, politics, and struggle with Nate Wallace, co-host of the Redspin Sports Podcast. Nate, thanks so much for joining us.
Hey, glad to be back.
Absolutely. And Nate, I wanted to begin today talking about a young man named Cameron Kinley, who said that he is speechless because the Navy is refusing to let him pursue a career with the National Football League. And I was hoping you could sort of help break down what's happening in the situation. Now, I personally am not aware of hearing of many things like this before, but what is happening here with the military seemingly holding him back from entering the league?
All right, there's so much to get into here. First of all, this really hit the nation in kind of a national media story this week when the Washington Post dropped this article a few days ago, and it's like basically going into. It's clear that his agent kind of set this up after getting this back. That was written by Kareem Copeland and published on June 9th. So this was Wednesday, and the thing is with this is that they have been, approving these waivers. What it is when you go to one of the service academies, whether it be West Point, Annapolis, or Naval Academy, or Air Force, you have a 5-year service commitment. You're a commissioned officer, but for purposes of like soft power, for purposes of the PR value, propaganda, and having a program that gives like visibility to the Naval Academy or to Army, whatever it is, and in this case, it is the Naval Academy in Annapolis, Maryland. They've been giving these waivers, all right, and so there are players in the NFL from the service academies, mind you, to have a successful football program, which they hold up as being a very valuable asset for them in terms of projecting an image of the military that is different from, the stories of PTSD and all the negative things that go along with war, especially in this era of hybrid warfare post Iraq and war on terror. And I think that there's a huge internal battle going on within the military establishment about whether or not playing the sort of soft power game is something that is an objective that they deem important versus people that just say you need to shut up, kill your own, like whatever your own aspirations are, don't matter. You got to buy in and sort of like the annihilation of the self and the conforming to the group identity, but that's really not going to help them on the recruiting trail, as Navy has been had a rough year the last couple of years, but it's been really a powerhouse in college football. I wouldn't say a powerhouse, but it's been beating teams like Notre Dame and beating a lot of major programs. So to take away a chance for Cameron Kinley, who is ironically in no way, shape, or form like a Colin Kaepernick type guy or a Justin Jackson. I mean, he's someone who wants to be the president of the United States one day. He's someone that was really excited to hear Kamala Harris come speak at their commencement ceremony, but had it all, really had a sour taste in his mouth after this because, he had been led to believe that like this was something that was going to be available as a route. And it was something he was going to use to try to promote actually the Naval Academy, his experience there that would have helped them a lot. So it shows me that just like there's always a battle between the Pentagon and CIA, the Pentagon's more just go in, war, just traditional type, let's attack. CIA always tries to play these games, these little like, propaganda PR battle games. And the irony is that these commenters, though, and you have to pay money for a Washington Post subscription to get on here and really with some of the most paternalistic, disgusting type comments for people that like self-identify even as being quote unquote liberal and are Washington Post readers and all that comes with that. I mean, some of these are just flat out astounding. I mean, you're talking just telling them basically, shut up. Like this is our taxpayer. We're paying for you, young men. You have been denied. Your childhood is over. You are now an officer and a gentleman. Officers do what they are told. Gentlemen do what they say they are going to. As if like that's like a reasonable opinion. Naval officer is much more important to a society than anything a professional athlete can ever hope to be. We have trained Mr. Kinley to lead our young adults, our children into hazardous circumstances and hopefully bring them back alive with mission accomplished. I mean, this is like, those are not anecdotal. These are like reflective of like the majority of the comments you see in the Washington Post. So really ripping the veneer off the idea of liberalism being something that's progressive whatsoever.
Yeah, and I'm wondering what like the history of this is, because this happens, or at least college athletes, football players, particularly leaving the academies and going into their commissions with the military, and then serving that time and then trying to get back into the NFL. How often has this happened with the military saying, no, you can't skip this commitment, and you must take this commission? How often has the military stopped players from using this waiver?
Well, they certainly have before, and they have a history of it. But the thing is, there was a clear break in that policy. And the understanding was that since that break had happened, and in the last few years, there had been a noticeable shift, and it was becoming really a norm, that this was like now something that was acceptable. And let's be clear, this does not have anything to do with him like getting out of serving. I mean, and what's really disgusting are like so many of the comments, and I'm not just talking about one random guy, mere person. I'm talking about like a really good representative sample are talking about, well, you need to serve now because you get to go pursue your own dreams. And then you're going to come back and, with a messed up body and brain injuries and whatnot, essentially just, just acting as if like that's just a foregone conclusion, which says a lot in and of itself. But let's not forget, these very people just saying these are just games are the same people, I want to take a bet right now, that are going to be there at the Army-Navy game in Philadelphia in early December next year and treating that like it's some kind of life and death affair between, who wins Army versus Navy in a packed stadium on national TV on CBS. So, I mean, we have a history. Roger Staubach actually did serve his the famous Dallas Cowboy Hall of Fame quarterback. He did serve and then went back, and that's actually being used as a way to say, look at Roger Staubach, what he did. Well, this ungrateful black, kid, sort of, so to speak, from Memphis, Tennessee, who, is thinking he's all, uppity, and that sort of the language and discourse is clearly not the subtle, is the not so subtle subtext going on here. So this is not, it's not unprecedented that these have been denied, but even with cases like David Robinson of the San Antonio Spurs, the great basketball player, they made exceptions and let him carry that, serve in different ways while he was playing. So it seems like there's a clear break, and this is sort of a move to try to put a lid on sort of the idea of like football being a window into the Naval Academy, and the PR they get from that.
Definitely. And switching gears a little bit, Nate, there's a man, Matt Schembechler, if I'm saying that correct.
Schembechler, yeah.
Schembechler, thank you. Who is the son of football coach Bo Schembechler, legendary figure at the University of Michigan, is saying that he was sexually abused by a former team doctor that's now being investigated by the school. And what's worse than that, his father knew this was going on and did nothing about it. I mean, this is pretty dark here. And I was hoping you could sort of help us understand a little bit more of what's happening.
Yeah, to give some context, there was a press conference yesterday in suburban Detroit with Matt Schembechler, who's a 62-year-old now, who, when he was a 10-year-old, experienced abuse at the hands of Dr. Anderson, who, according to, Giovanni Johnson, a wide receiver on the Michigan football team, at the same time, the current head coach, Jim Harbaugh, who played at Michigan under Schembechler, defended him vehemently this week, saying he never left any stone unturned, everything he was aware of. He was aware of everything within the program that, Harbaugh, of course, people probably remember as being a Super Bowl head coach with the 49ers, and was the guy who drafted Colin Kaepernick and, elevated him to starter in the NFL. But now he's out here going out on a limb, defending the late Bo Schembechler, who even his own son points out that his mother was an advocate for him, but his father, when he was a 10-year-old and went home and told his father about what Dr. Anderson had done in terms of touching his genitals and, basically other stuff I don't really want to get into, like with the, all sorts of just inappropriate stuff, that he punched him in the chest and told him to shut the F up, basically, and toughen up. And there's something about this whole greatest generation, I'd say that in air quotes, that like, you see this with repeated examples, I feel like, whether it's the Catholic Church or whether it was the stuff at Penn State and now at Michigan, where that generation had this idea that being tough meant you just endure horrible stuff. You don't speak of things that are unpleasant. And I just think it's really an indictment against that whole idea that there's a certain level of greatness with that generation that other generations lack. But yeah, this is really blowing up right now. This is a figure that has Schembechler Hall named after him, statues all over the University of Michigan campus. There's a class element too, because when Michigan State, which is like more of an ag school in Michigan, engineering that doesn't have the same level of elite sort of reputation as Michigan, when this happened with Dr. Larry Nassar of USA Gymnastics, I mean, that was wall to wall. But you hear people on sports radio in Detroit now saying, why are they not covering this the same way with the University of Michigan? And the implication being that the University of Michigan has power brokers and is kind of like, in a way, but it is starting to trickle out in a big way now, and they can't keep a lid on it anymore. Mitch Albom, the famous columnist with the Detroit Free Press, is writing, just really detailed graphic stuff today about quoting former players. The idea was that you got andersized. All the former players talked about if you had to go to the doctors, go in for a physical. It was just sort of an understanding that was part of it. You better not. It goes. Johnson said, the wide receiver I mentioned earlier, detailed that one occasion in which he had a rectal exam and Anderson played with my penis. Johnson said he felt uncomfortable, and that then he goes on another thing with anal pin with his finger. It's just disgusting. I mean, it's just absolutely. And the idea was that he told a teammate who said, "Oh, other players told me not to bring it up with Bo again. That Bo might pull my scholarship. I was told not to rock the boat." It's amazing, because what incentive all the doctors in the state of Michigan who would love to be the team doctor at a school like this, why to protect somebody like this is just astounding. And it fits in with the larger idea of Bo Schembechler preaching the death of the self. Everything's the team. So that logic taken to its conclusion gives you the idea that protect the institution over over individuals who are victims, no matter what, because it's all about, quote, the team. And in this case, the team is University of Michigan football.
You know what this reminds me of? The scandal surrounding Joe Paterno. And I remember how people were, just going after the players and the kids who came forward in the investigation, and how people were saying that, well, why would you blame Joe Paterno? But see, I think this kind of story is proving why you do hold people accountable who had the information that students were being abused, because they're complicit. And they could have stopped that abuse, and they chose not to, for the exact reason that you just said, Nate, because the team, the institution is bigger than the individual. And we see how dangerous and harmful that is. And I'm wondering if in the reporting of this current story, if people are referencing the case of Joe Paterno and that whole horrific chapter in college sports history.
Absolutely. We discussed this last night on Redspin Sports. I mean, if anything, not at all to play defense attorney for Joe Paterno, because he absolutely should have done more. I mean, but let's not forget, this would be even more direct, because it's not like the Penn State case where it was like Jerry Sandusky was doing this. Paterno, he should have done more. Absolutely. But he did actually go report it to Penn State. There are other factors there that are even maybe above Joe Paterno, such as the whole administration potentially wanting to keep a lid on this, and Jerry Sandusky being protected even after he was fired by Joe Paterno, or after the 97 season, I believe. So not at all to defend. Paterno should have and could have done more. But I think the scary thing is that this is even worse in the sense that his own son came up to him, a 10-year-old, like bearing his heart about this. And the guy not only doesn't have empathy for his son, he punches him, tells him to toughen up, and he makes sure that the guy retains his job. I mean, Paterno should have done more, but he wasn't like, but people, that was also, there were institutional layers to that too, where there were people that, above that in the institution, boosters, powerful movers and shakers. Let's not forget the Penn State situation. There's a district attorney investigating the Sandusky case who has literally gone missing, and people still have never accounted for where the guy is. And I mean, it's just utterly astounding. So the thing that's I think that's going to be earth shattering here is that this is only just really starting to come out, and really more. And as it starts to go, it just really shows how it takes the courage of somebody to step forward. And it took one kind of doing that finally, talking about his own son, Matt Schembechler, talked about the inability to form intimate relationships in his own adult life now as a result of this trauma. That even his mother trying to advocate for him could not, really do anything to stand up to the power of a Bo Schembechler in this case. And this is a guy that is literally revered for like all that's kind of good and decent in the world, and really the values of kind of petty bourgeois American ideology. The idea of just like, you go, this is a sort of like coming of age game you play. You're learning to become part of a team, but in doing that, not in the sense of like solidarity and like, becoming part of a collective to empower people, but becoming part of a collective to really, destroy the individual, but to like elevate the power of like a corporate institution, as in the modern neoliberal framework of academia that exists now, and the way that sports provides a window for that, especially college football. And so I think that there's obviously similarities, but I think the scary thing is that in terms of the culpability directly to Schembechler, I think there's even more in this case. And that's not at all to act as if Paterno didn't have culpability, but I should have done more. But I think it's just a testament to just how egregious this is right here.
Yeah, I mean, what we're talking about here, Nate, is just unconscionable. And for me, it factors into, when we talk about college football, about how abusive this kind of culture can be. And certainly we know that there are, coaches who have, healthy dynamics, healthy relationship with their players, really do want the best for them, want them to develop as athletes, as students, and as human beings. But even within that, like from the physicality of it to everything to what the student athletes are expected to sacrifice and all of that. And particularly, and let's not forget the fact also, there's always a sort of overarching thing of the big business of college football and college sports in general. So in a way, I feel like sort of the nature of college sports itself almost helps creates these kinds of environments that can be rife with abuse that can, go on with impunity. You know what I mean? And I feel like this is just one of the ones that we're finding out about now. But I mean, I think unfortunately, it just seems part of a pattern in a way.
Unfortunately, it is. It's what happens when you allow one figure, a person, an individual, to be lionized to such an extent to then be seen as such a saint and above reproach that everyone's afraid to even approach them. I mean, to even approach them is to commit an offense. I mean, Jim Harbaugh, we haven't heard him respond to the latest stuff from Matt Schembechler, the son of Bo. We heard him respond to the first player to come out earlier in the week and speaking about, which was you had Daniel Kwiatkowski. I might be pronouncing that wrong. And then you have the guy Johnson I mentioned earlier. But with those two, Johnson and Kwiatkowski, that's different now than his own son. And so it'd be interesting to see what Harbaugh does, who's under the spotlight, had to take a big pay cut this year, has been totally unable to beat their rival Ohio State or even compete with them. So there's a lot of rumblings of fans and boosters that are already not happy. And what this is going to do, because, I mean, this is going to be a long, protracted black eye for a university that prides itself on being really like kind of Ivy League light, essentially, and one of the elite public institutions in the U.S. So it's really, I think you can't ignore the fact that there are probably similar examples like this but also, I mean, yeah, there are great coaches, but even and I know a lot of them and I've been part of that, but it's like, you're right. The structure of things is something you cannot just ignore, that even trying to have morality and do the right thing within a system that's inherently exploitative and immoral. And on a larger level, like look at what we do internationally and abroad, and the way that our U.S. imperialism and our military acts as like the enforcers of those policies. Where that's the society we live in. So it's not hard to figure out that these things are the institutions within that society are going to have dynamics that mirror those.
Absolutely. Well, we thank you so much, as always, Nate, for joining us today. We're going to leave it there. We'll move to a break here on By Any Means Necessary on Radio Sputnik in Washington, D.C., but we'll be right back. So please stay with us.
By any means necessary.